Fox News host Jeanine Pirro, like a lot of right-wingers, is not thrilled with President Joe Biden's announcement that he is canceling some student loan debt for lower-income borrowers. And I mean lower income, as in below $125,000 for individuals and $250,000 for married couples. Nonetheless, she, on the 5, made a very angry rant. And in the middle of said rant, she admitted a little bit of a fun fact, the fact that she did not even pay for her own college.
The sad part about all this is there's no talk of responsibility. My heart bleeds for the people who actually went out and paid for their loans, who went without things, whose families said, I'm sorry, we can't afford to pay for your loans. Look, my family paid for my education. I'm sure they had better things to do with their money. I didn't have to take out a loan because they paid for it, but they worked hard for their money. This is a giveaway, and it's disgusting.
What about those people who work?
My family, they paid for it, but we need responsibility for those who had to take out loans whose families didn't pay for it. You just talked about responsibility, and you absolutely then admitted that you took no responsibility. None at all. That's amazing. It's really peak Fox News boomer right there. Okay? No offense to the boomers watching, right? You're a lefty boomer. You're great. But this is, again, Fox News right-wing boomer. So let me explain, too. Now, Jeanine Pirro, she's 71 years old. She graduated back in 1975. So now, let me give you some facts, okay? The average tuition when Jeanine Pirro graduated from school, and this is at a public college, by the way, was only about $542 a year. Huh. Okay. Now, that said, Jeanine Pirro went to a private school, the Albany Law School of Union University. Oh, yes. Albany Law School. Very, very prestigious, I guess, law school. Now, she graduated from that, again, 1975. And when she was there, well, tuition cost an annual $2,300 per year. Oh, so look at that. Great. That's much more expensive, sure. And look, honestly, between you and me, it's a little bit too expensive because she's a moron. Not a very smart person, okay? That said, right? Here's how much student loans, I should say not student loans, but tuition has increased at both public and private schools since around that time, okay? From 1969 to 2019, the average annual cost of a 4-year public school has increased by 3,009%. The annual average cost of a 4-year private school has increased by 2,310%. Huh. So, wow, that is just an enormous increase in the costs. So now, conservatives, it's funny because when you debate some Republicans on this, they actually do bring up a good point. Yes, it turns out that having the government become the primary lender of student loans has definitely contributed to driving up the cost of college. It's true. We all know this. These are facts. Okay. And facts don't have a bias when it comes to politics. And so if you're saying, hey, look, the government being a lender, and by the way, being a lender in pretty much anything, right, is since you guarantee that, yeah, people are going to say, oh, it's guaranteed by the government, so I'm just going to raise my price because the government will still lend out that money. Okay. All right. And again, you have all of this money that the government is loaning out to 18-year-olds. Now, they can get trapped in this debt. That's a gigantic problem. Huge. But see, in order to solve it, you kind of have to understand why the government became a lender in the first place. And there's actually a long history that starts back in 1965. So now, after Sputnik was launched, the government decided, oh, crap, we need more workers in STEM. We need to beat the Russians. So what they did is that they created the Federal Family Education Loan Program, the FFEL loan program. So now what they did through that program is began subsidizing and guaranteeing private student loans. So through the FFEL, lenders receive federal subsidies to extend low interest loans, with the government agreeing to cover the costs or most losses, if the student defaulted on their loan. Now, back then, college still wasn't super expensive in the first place because you still had states funding higher education. So states would still put money into these colleges in order to keep tuition lower for people, but still there are people who still weren't able to afford to go to college, and there were still out-of-pocket costs. And so the banks, again, when people went to the banks to try and take out this money because there wasn't a public loan, the banks would deny it to certain people, mostly black people. Let's be honest about that and keeping it real, right? So now the government said, okay, let's start guaranteeing private loans, so to make it so that they'll have a little bit more liquidity, they'll loan out to other people. So now at the same time, over the years, Republicans also continued, or I should say started, really defunding the colleges at the state level. And I believe that began during the Reagan administration. So now, without funding, these state schools had to raise their tuition. And so in response to that, in the 70s, and again, I got my times mixed up here. Reagan was in the 80s, but nonetheless, you still had the defunding that was going on, but I think it increased during Reagan. And you had the government in the 70s creating Sallie Mae. Sallie Mae allowed for a little bit more lending under the FFEL program. In the 90s, the government then decided to switch to direct lending to get the private banks out of it, or at least not as much in it. And so they just said, let's do more direct funding. We'll stop guaranteeing as many private loans or any private loans because, again, private loans, you had these credit requirements and would not lend to certain types of people. Again, we're talking about black people, mainly. So now by then, even more funding was taken out of public colleges and universities that caused higher amounts, the needs for higher amounts to be taken out by people who wanted to get an education. And since now the government was a major lender, not only could more people get the loans to go to college, but the colleges also realized that they could increase tuition infinitely. They could just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Doing it wild. Just jacking up that tuition. And again, somehow this turned into
sexual anarchy.
But anyway, okay. So look, all of this has contributed, and I'm sure there are other factors involved, where you had tuition that just spiraled out of control. And of course, you also at the same time, you had the Great Divergence. You had wages being separated from productivity. And so now you had Americans being more productive than ever, but wages not keeping up with that. And so I guess in order to try to get, those better paying jobs, a lot of Americans looked at higher education and said, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take out these federal loans, which again, at the time weren't as expensive as they were now because tuition wasn't at the level that it is now, to try and get ahead. And of course that increased demand because then more people would see that, oh, hey, Johnny got a college degree. Johnny's making six figures now. I want to be like Johnny because I'm stuck at this job that, continues to not pay enough. And so again, here we have these costs just spiraling out of control. And now we have we've been to a point for a while where the average working person, even with, wages and a college degree, they're not able to pay off the loans that they had. It's just too much money. So now the solution here, and this is where Republicans are wrong. And by the way, this is also where corporate Democrats are wrong. We need a clean slate. That's step one. You've got to wipe out all the student loan debt. Gone. Get rid of all of it. But that's not the only thing. Because again, if you just wipe out the debt and then keep the loan system the same, you're just going to run into the same problem in 20 years. No, you have to go and make public colleges and universities tuition free. You have to get rid of the student loans by funding schools. You fund the colleges, and you negotiate using the power of government to cap or at least really bring down the price of tuition, and then keep it in check with government negotiation so that this does not happen, so that the costs of college do not, again, spiral out of control. Because right now, we still have a student loan program that has no price caps. And again, if you can continue to borrow all of this money from the government that is guaranteed, you're going to just run into this problem. So again, get rid of it. Have the federal government or the state governments fund the colleges directly, have no tuition for the students, and then you solve the problem. Now, the right wing, of course, hates this idea. They hate it. And Democrats, unfortunately, are not bold enough to actually do that. Joe Biden, what he did was good. But again, he should have done, I believe he should have done more, wiped it all out. It's just corporate Democrats, conservative Democrats are not bold enough to take that step. People like Bernie Sanders are correct, and that we should take that step because that's what's going to solve the real problem. Now, conservatives also, by the way, are correct on something else. Is it a buy-off for the midterms? Yeah, of course. Of course. Look, anytime you do something for the voters that happens to be popular, then yes, that's going to increase turnout. Now, again, Republicans, did you just figure that out? Did you just figure doing things to help voters will get voters to turn out for you? Wow. I can't believe it. You just figured it out. I know it was a mystery. I know it was a secret for so long, but you finally figured it out, didn't you? No, you knew it already. Now, but here's the thing. The modern Republican Party doesn't give their base anything at this point other than hate and fear. The culture war. That's it. The culture war. Their real constituents, the people that Republicans actually work for, that's giant corporations and the rich. And guess what? Republicans and corporate Democrats, by the way, get together and they give them all the goodies they could ever ask for. You got tax cuts here, you got deregulation over here. That's what they actually care about. Privatization over here. But look, this is why Republicans are so salty about this, because again, you do have some help going to about 43 million people. And I think that will make, I think it might help in the turnout for the midterm elections. Republicans can't stand it when you help average people, and especially can't stand it when Democrats actually get more votes.